then we say that worship was not good. But you see, worship is not what we get out of it. It's what we give back to God. We have been programmed by the world to think in entertainment in consumer ways. When I come for this hour, I am here to consume something. To consume the Word of God. To consume the atmosphere. To consume the Spirit of God. I have come to be entertained, which is another way that society looks at things. I have come so that I might feel good when I leave this place. But worship is all about offering to God the things that we did for Him this past week. Now, if I were to challenge you right now to stop and make a list of all of the things that you specifically did for God this past week, how long would your list be? You see, that's what we're talking about when we talk about worship. We must be aware of God moving in our lives in such a way that when we come to worship, that we can offer because we recognize, our mind understands that what we just did, we did as service for the Lord. It might have been that we helped a neighbor or helped a friend that was in need. We might have resisted temptation or read the Bible instead of the newspaper. All sorts of things that we can bring as an offering to God on Sunday morning. Now I want you to imagine this with me. What would our worship look like? What would it feel like? What would be the experience of our worship if in next Sunday's worship time you were to bring in your heart to offer to God all of the things that you did this coming week to be able to serve God and to serve your neighbor? Boy, I can just see the Spirit of God just moving in our midst, getting so excited because we're finally getting it. We are the ones that are offering the worship. We are not the ones sitting here consuming the worship. I want to encourage you to do that next week. This week, as you walk through this life, I want you to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice and then pay attention intellectually in your mind to what it is that God has called you to do, so that next week you can bring that and lay that on the spiritual altar that we will have. Now he goes on then in the second verse to say, do not be conformed to the world. That's a negative. He talks about the positive in just a minute, but let's take a look at what the negative might mean. To be conformed to the world, go ahead and hit the next one, means that we have a right to ignore or even hate God. That's what the world says, if we conform to the world. The next one, we have a right to abuse people, conforming to the understanding of the world. Number 3, we have a right to pursue and use power. That's a right. The culture tells us so. Number 4, we have a right to accumulate wealth for purely selfish reasons. That's what the world teaches us. Conform to that image. Number 5, we have a right to have all of our desires fulfilled. That's what the world tells us. Are we conforming to that image? Finally, number 6, we have a right to use personal abilities and wisdom for self-advancement rather than for serving others. That's what the world teaches. But Paul tells us, do not be conformed to the world. All of these things that we have talked about are teachings of the world, not teachings of God. Instead, he says, be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Now, when we talk about the mind, we're talking about the intellect. We're talking about the way that we think. We're talking about studying new things so that we might understand new things. You see, God's way is one of service. God's way is one of sacrifice, of love, of forgiveness. Without a renewed mind, we will find every reason we need to not do any of those things of God, because our mind will still be in the world. With a renewed mind, we search after those things. Without the renewed mind, we just come up with excuses. And we will never know God's great blessing for our lives. You see, that's what the will is all about. God's will is to bless us beyond our wildest imagination. But God can't do that if our mind is not transformed. We're about to go to the ministry fair here in just a minute. I told you that we were going to be cutting the service short so that you can have time for the rest of this worship time to go into the fellowship hall. We have over 40 different places of service that you can find. I'm sure that there's at least one there that might interest you. So I want you to go and talk to the people that are in charge of the ministries. I want you to find out what the ministries are all about. There are folks at all the tables, so you don't have to sign up blind. Just see what it is the Spirit is moving you to. There will be a card that you can sign to say, yes, this is what I want to do this coming year. And you are supposed to be contacted this coming week by either the person that is coordinating it or one of the other leaders of the church. So I want you to do this for me. If you sign up for something and nobody contacts you this coming week, I want you to tell me about it next Sunday. I want you to tell me what it was that you signed up for that you did not get a contact to say, thank you for signing up, and this is when we're going to get started. We need to know, because we want every person in this church engaged in ministry, not just writing their name down on a piece of paper. Now, many of you are already serving. And so what I would encourage you to do is to go to those places that you are serving right now, that you want to continue serving next year, and sign a card. Don't think that just because you were working in that ministry, that your name is going to continue to be on that. Every year, we should have an opportunity to reset our lives. To say, you know, that didn't work for me last year, but I want to try something else. So if you are signed up for any of the ministries already, if you're engaged in any of the ministries, and you plan to continue doing that next year, please go ahead and sign up so that we will have your name in that spot. Now, folks, this is not our offering to the church. This is our offering as living sacrifices to God Himself. God is calling us to be transformed in the renewing of our mind, but that means then that we put to the test and we put our bodies engaged in ministry as our minds are being transformed into His image.